Good evening, everybody. It has been roughly 50 hours since the dastardly attack in Pahalgam on unarmed tourists, on Hindus, on Indian Hindus who were singled out and targeted the other day. And Jay and I were initially thinking of consolidating our thoughts and recording something that day. But fortunately, we decided to wait because that gave us more time to dig through research and re research many opinions and many thoughts by various experts and laypersons like ourselves. And now we feel like we have gathered enough to be able to release an episode by ourselves. There are some things that have been very well established already. Let's just start with point A. Nobody is going to dispute that there should be a retaliation. I think most of the country is on the same page about a retaliation. What should be the nature of the retaliation is up to debate, and many debates are happening as we go through our day-to-day lives. But the general consensus is, even in the policy making circles and the civil society, that there should be some kind of retaliation. Point number two, another thing which is not up for debate is that the blood is on the hands of the ISI and the Pakistani military establishment. Their fingerprints are all over the crime scene.
Asim Munir.
Yeah, and
Munir.
that is also something that has general consensus along, again, the policy making circles and the civil society also. Point number three is, this is where we start noting down the factors which may have been pinching the Pakistani army, the military establishment, the intelligence establishment over there. That to the great credit of the Modi government was making great successes in Kashmir. You have to see that in a time where we have so much violence going on around the world, Narendra Modi government managed to keep the Article 370 revocation bloodless, the conducting of assembly elections in Jammu and Kashmir bloodless, with great participation of the Kashmiri population also. What does that imply? That imply that no matter who wins, the fact was that the Kashmiri populace was trusting the Indian political system. That was a great win for the Modi Shah government.
Absolutely. To add to what you're saying, a lot of political cynics, specifically within inside the country, were saying that, oh, it was wrapped inside, like, this tricolor and people were not given the freedoms and all. But I think the first step towards democracy is ensuring that there are free and fair elections.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that a government which was quite vehemently against the central establishment, the central command of the BJP, that government one was inherently a victory for Indian democracy.
Yeah.
And there is another thing that I would like to point out, and this is where I feel there is some criticisms that needs to be, that needs to be thrown at the government, is that there was a lot of violence happening in Jammu. There was a lot of violence. There was like a whole spike of violence that was happening.
In fact, Jay and I at IndieCast have covered.
multiple episodes.
We've
about
covered the
violence.
Jammu violence, whether it was the violence in Riyasi, Kathua, even Jammu areas around Jammu city. There have been instances starting maybe January 2023 all the way into mid 2024. There were lots of instances in Jammu. We have covered that almost very regularly.
Very regularly.
So I'm not using this to sort of promote our venture, but the fact of the matter is that we must keep sustaining voices on security related to J&K. It can't be a one-off reactive affair. You have to keep monitoring and talking about it. Jay, sorry, you were saying something.
No. I totally agree with you, and I feel now is the time that we stop, analyzing a lot of things just because we don't support the central government. Of course, the central government deserves a lot of criticism. Its policies, we know we have criticized the central government a lot of times, but now is the time where we, shed our political affiliations, our allegiances, and just stand behind the Indian Union. We need to remind a lot of people that a lot of Muslims have also died for the cause of Indian democracy in J&K. We need to remind a lot of people that it's not a Hindu-Muslim issue. It is strictly an issue of terrorism, an issue of Punjabi monopolization of Islam in Pakistan, and it is also an issue of Asim Munir trying to get some benefits out of his tenure as an army chief, because I feel he's been surrounded by every side. There is a massive upscale there has been a massive uptick in violence in Baluchistan, and you know the kind of battering that the Pakistani army has been receiving from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and we remember the infamous suicide bombing which happened in a police establishment where, like, you know, almost 100 Pakistani police personnel were killed. So Pakistan essentially is on the back foot, and I feel by conducting this dastardly and cowardly attack, what it has done is that it has opened another front for itself, and it actually wants this front to be opened because let's not forget
You
the
can garner
two-nation-
domestic support.
two-nation theory was basically the genesis of Hindu-Muslim politics in the modern sense, because in 1906 you had a bunch of zamindar aristocratic Muslims who were extremely insecure about the revivalist Hindu movements that were happening in and around the Bengal presidency, and they wanted to do something similar for the Muslims as well, and that suddenly put pressure on the British establishment through their lobbying to ensure that Muslims have separate electorates through the Morley Minto reforms. This is the genesis of the Hindu-Muslim divide in the country, and in response to that, you had the creation of RSS. So, if we do not consider this, we will not understand as to what is happening right now, because the sense here, Raj, and this is also an extremely cynical perspective that I'm giving you. Obviously, this is not true for everyone, but there is a certain section of ecclesiastical slash clerical slash orthodox Muslims which actually do believe in this theory that they cannot be ruled by kafirs. As simple as that. So, being governed by kafirs inherently is, like, you know, antithetical to Islam. So that is why you had the two-nation theory, and the whole idea of Indian democracy existing and the whole idea of Bangladesh getting created is a big slap on that type of ideology, and this is what Pakistan wants to revive. This is what Asim Munir wants to revive, because this is what Asim Munir talked about quite braggadociously in his recent speech, where he said that Hindus and Muslims are totally different, they have different customs, and the fact of
Different
the matter is,
ambitions.
different ambitions, and of course we have different ambitions. We have totally different cultures than yours. That's absolutely true, and that is the thing. Like, you know, if you're gonna push a community to the wall, because let's not forget the Muslim community in India was the ruling class for almost 800 years. They ruled everything, they controlled all the resources. So now's the time when that particular ideology was able to engulf, like, the Persian cultures, they were able to engulf, say, the Byzantine culture in the Middle East. I mean, the Hindus survived, right? So there is definitely different ambitions, and there is definitely a will to fight amongst the Hindus as well. So I feel this type of, you know, bravado is not only a double-edged sword, but it's probably going to cause Pakistan more harm.
Right. It's an interesting historical perspective into the mindset of maybe the Pakistani general and the Pakistani elite who have naturally played a huge
Of course, they
role
view
in.
Hindus as like some you know,
Yeah.
some downtrodden, lower genetic humans.
Like let's okay let's
No,
let's
that,
let's
that is
yeah
what
I
he
mean
said. He said
let's
it's a
come back to
superior ideology.
let's
He
come
said
back
that
to
their ideology is a superior ideology. Anyway, Raj, go ahead. I had to
yeah
finish.
let's come back to like the incident and the responsiveness of that incident. Let's just look at I was evaluating the successes that the government has made in JNK post 2019, right? So we have established, and Jaz already said that with Pakistan army being on the back foot domestically, we need to know that Pakistan army is a political force within the nation. So garnering public support is very important for them. As opposed to, for example, if the Indian army has to operate in India, they won't. Naturally, people in India generally approve of the Indian army, but Indian army doesn't have to go out of its way to seek people's approval. For Pakistan, it's different because the Pakistani army is a major political force. It's an industrial house. So Pakistani army needs public support to a large sense. What has happened lately is that Imran Khan had become greatly popular. They are having issues in Balochistan. They have had a lot of issues in the with the Tehreek-e-Taliban. So the Taliban, for example, doesn't recognize the Durand Line. They claim that the frontier areas of Pakistan are also basically Taliban controlled or held territories. This is adding a lot of domestic pressure to the Pakistani army, and they would want to act in a manner that can sort of unify the country behind the Pakistan army. So I feel like Kashmir was maybe their card that they were sort of holding on to play domestically. So this was important for the domestic political goals of the Pakistan army also. Point B, I also think that there was a great amount of pinch that they were facing with the narrative that now the average Kashmiri has started participating in India's political process. The Kashmir Valley has now really seen a radical improvement in the situation. As a result, the tourism revenues were spiking. And because tourism was so high, there is a natural relationship that the average Kashmiri was forming with the Indian tourist. As a result, their earnings were growing higher. And this thing sort of had to be averted very quickly for the Pakistani army. And I feel like whichever commandos who like, I'm calling them commandos intentionally because these are very specially trained
Yeah, they're
fighters.
not just random guerrillas. They're properly trained
You have
Pakistani
to note
military
that
officials.
these are probably some of the 10-20% of the Pakistani trained Lashkars or terrorists who can climb those really steep mountains and then sort of infiltrate India's LOC. They can tap the fencing, although it's not a fully fenced area because you have to understand the terrain. There are rivers some places, there are really difficult to scale mountains in some areas. So to physically fence the whole thing it's strategically very difficult to do. So you have to understand that these fighters are people who've probably made that climb, to first go and train in Pakistan and then to come back. So these are specialized fighters who have been camping in India for a while, and the fact of the matter is that they are well trained. That's why they have been able to effectively attack a lot of Indian army personnel in Jammu. That's why they have been able to conduct this attack in Pahalgam. And that's one of the reasons why we need to start taking the process of infiltration prevention very seriously. Because one opinion that I was hearing over and over by Indian security experts was that maybe after the narrative changed, when people started saying that the terrorism situation in the valley has improved, there was a very slow erosion of the standard operating procedures on the security forces part also. It is easy to get complacent when you see easy times, and maybe some people in our security forces are also human. So there was a natural attitude in everybody's heads, including our own, that a lot of terrorist incidents are now shifted to Jammu and the valley is largely peaceful. There was very little instances of tourists having been attacked before. There are a few handful, mainly of pilgrims being attacked, but there was
Again, for being Hindus.
yeah, and there was no incident of this sort where a popular public tourist destination was attacked like this. So I'm not defending intelligence failure on our part, but maybe after some point, Indian security apparatus also gets slightly. See, they have their manpower limitations. So maybe there was a redirection of forces. Maybe covering a tourist destination was not a policy priority at that moment. And definitely it is a failure, and definitely some heads within the security apparatus should roll. But I'm just giving you a perspective. I'll just end with one story before I move back to Jay. That I was, I promise this will become relevant. I was once playing a golf match in Delhi with a gentleman who was a deputy commandant in the CRPF and a gentleman who was a Delhi businessman. And the businessman said that, I'm very scared of going to Kashmir with my family. And I remember so clearly that the deputy commandant basically said that, सर मैं आपको लिखित में गारंटी दे सकता हूँ कि वो सिक्योरिटी फोर्सेस और कश्मीरी पंडितों के बजाय किसी को अटैक करते ही नहीं हैं. So that is the kind of confidence our security forces had on the inability of the terrorists to attack a tourist. But that has now happened on a great degree. So we need to really start shifting our policy view, and maybe the time to lower our guard in the valley will come much later. We can't afford to do that right now. Jay, back to you.
Yeah, credit where it's due. A lot of widespread condemnation has come from the Kashmiri people as well. Because what used to happen before that was there was definitely a certain section of Kashmiris who used to celebrate any type of attack that used to happen against the security forces. But I have never seen such unanimous and such widespread condemnation from the Kashmiris, and like, people have come on to the streets and have condemned these attacks, and that has actually never happened in the history of this insurgency, and that's why I'm a bit optimistic about it. No matter what the cynics have to say, it is an occupation force, 370 was removed, but on the ground, the thing is that if people are able to get a decent livelihood, if they're able to put some food on the table, if they're able to generate some income, I think they eventually, come to terms with the reality as to this is what they prefer than say outright autocracy. Because there are a lot of reports of human rights violations on the Azad Kashmir side as well. There has been a significant demographic change that has happened, because you've got again Punjabis coming in and settling in what were former Kashmiri territories. So I think it's high time this is my personal opinion, we should stop viewing Pakistan from the lens of Islam. I think that this is a conversation that we need to have. I think we have to view it from the perspective of a bunch of northern Punjabis who have accepted this Islamic doctrine as a way of ensuring that their zamindari does not go away, their land parcels don't go away, and they're essentially a bunch of warlords who have this entire country to themselves. And that is my personal take.
Well, that's a fair position. I think that I also think that there is a element of the theatrics to this whole thing, right? So the unfortunate attack was obviously an attack on the victims, but the major goal was to use it for its theatrics, because the psychological impact that it has on a billion people, that the story that you've been telling yourself about improvements in JNK situation, improvements in the valley tourism, was essentially a lie. This is not my perspective. This is what the message that the Lashkars are trying to send.
And I think they've succeeded in that message, because a lot of Indians have started saying, specifically on a different political spectrum who oppose the BJP, have literally, instead of condemning the attack, they've started saying that, oh, look at the lie that they've totally destroyed, which I feel is extremely patronizing, because
Yeah.
instead of focusing on the main issue, which is radical Islamist terror backed by a bunch of Punjabis, you're again talking about how this present government is responsible for the deaths of a bunch of civilians.
Yeah. See, just look at it like this. The attack was desperate because the government of India was winning in Kashmir. The attack was desperate because there was a certain degree of truth to the fact that we were able to revive tourism, forgive me, in JNK. There was a degree of truth to the fact that the voter participation in the JNK elections was very high. There was a truth to the fact that a lot of Kashmiri youth actually started identifying with the Indian political mainstreaming, and there was a certain degree of truth to the fact that Pakistan had its back against the wall. So it is definitely a desperate attempt, and in many ways now we have the insight of hindsight. So in many ways, if you put two and two together, you can almost see it coming now, because the everybody's talked about the Asim Munir speech, but the things that we haven't talked about are the fact that Pakistanis in principle blame India for most of their political instability. They blame India for anything that happens in Balochistan. They blame India now for supporting the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and they blame India for multiple other reasons. So it had its back against the wall, and Pakistan was very unstable. So it was a likely outcome of a desperate Pakistani army trying to gain political support domestically. There are definitely some areas where Indians need to take accountability in terms of security apparatus. I think that in a time where Amarnath Yatra is set to begin very soon, in a time where a US Vice President is in India, in a time where we have so many intelligence agencies just working in the valley alone. There are units of the Cabinet Secretariat, or RAW as we call it, for the valley. There are NIA offices in the valley and Jammu. There are military intelligence of the 15 Corps. There is Jammu and Kashmir Police State Intelligence. And you are telling me that despite all the attacks in Jammu, despite all the build up, despite the provocative speech, all our intelligence agencies missed this upcoming attack. So there is some accountability
I
we will
totally
have
agree
to
with you.
take. We
I
will have to
totally agree
take.
with you.
we have accounted for the factors in Pakistan that led to this attack. Now let's account for the security failures within India that led to this attack. I think that in India we need to start building a culture of rolling heads. I think that the Director General of Police of Jammu Kashmir, or maybe the DG of NIA, one of them should be repatriated or transferred, or I don't want to use the word fired because no government servant in India is actually fired, but they should at least be repatriated. I think the 15 corps commander can be transferred, a new, more capable officer can be brought in. So these are things that we will need to start
I
experimenting
think,
with.
yeah, that there is a massive problem with this present government of appointing their yes men, and I think that also needs to stop, because what happens is that if you have someone who's just agreeing to whatever you're trying to say, and he's not, acting like a good check, like a good check slash balance towards your perspective, you are just putting in people who are basically will probably going to cause a disaster.
They're scared of telling you the truth.
Yeah, they're scared of telling you the truth, and you will put these people in the position, and that is the biggest criticism of this particular government, and they just refuse to acknowledge that.
Jay, I've spent many weeks over many trips in Kashmir. It is hard to pass a few kilometers without a CRPF checkpost. It's hard to pass a army checkpost. There are sector headquarters of BSF, frontier headquarters of this force, brigade headquarters of the army. And despite all that, the first emergency response to the Pahalgam victims reached some 30 minutes after the attack. So there was a 30-minute window for indiscriminate firing where all these people were, be like, अच्छा आप हिंदू हो गोली मार दी, अच्छा आप हिंदू हो गोली मार दी, और ना हमारी फौज पहुंच पाई, ना हमारी पुलिस पहुंच पाई. So there is some accountability
Yeah,
that we
so
will
a
have to
lot
take.
of,
Sorry, I'll just finish. Don't forget your thought. This is impossible to do in Srinagar, for example. You're in Nigin Lake, Dal Lake. Every 10 meters, there's an armed CRPF man. This is impossible to do in, for example, Gurez, because everybody who travels to Gurez Valley is patted down 10, 20 times by the army. So there is a lot of thinking that the adversary is doing. Let's understand that the person on the other end is making intelligent decisions to try to harm you. So that's, I think, what they were doing was that they probably understood that these tourist areas are also very secure. They picked one out. They picked one that was difficult to reach, so the emergency response was not vehicular.
Absolutely. To add to what you're saying, I was talking to this very senior IPS officer a few years ago, and this was right after the Pulwama attack. And around that time, they were having a very difficult time to, right after the Pulwama attack, and they were having a very difficult time to actually pinpoint the fingers on the Pakistanis. And this senior IPS officer reached there, and he was able to establish the links, which was quite basic, which was like, something which was very evident for any experienced officer who served time in JNK. And he was extremely critical of this new generation of officers who were just there to, put a few posts on Instagram or Facebook, get a few pictures clicked with the weapons, and just not be there on the ground at all. They're not present at all. They're so busy writing books and expressing themselves in a way where they're appreciated as movie stars and not as officers. That's why we are witnessing all of this in this present time. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but 28 people are dead, 28 people are killed in the name of religion, so might as well someone has to criticize the
Yeah,
establishment.
I think one of the things we need to start doing is also, at some point we need to start seriously flirting with the idea of major reforms in our intelligence agencies. The fact that a few set of civil servants should only be able to gatekeep major intelligence agencies is an idea that needs to now be revisited. I'm not saying that we should, remove all civil service or, IPS cadre from intelligence agencies, but this is something that was this is a voice that was raised around 2611. This is a voice that was raised maybe around Pathankot again. So let's not be biased towards any organization or service here,
Absolutely.
but we need to start revisiting the efficiency of using intelligence agencies as good postings. The director of intelligence bureau is, for example, a prime posting for an IPS officer. It's not typically a posting where only competence and hard work will get you. So that's a very good way of crowding out competence. And this yes manship in our bureaucracy has to be sort of eliminated.
Absolutely.
And you need to start appointing competent heads
Yes.
of CAPFs and
Yeah.
intelligence
We are
agencies.
totally forgetting that till this day we have inherited and we have made it even better. Like the system that we've inherited from the British, specifically with respect to the bureaucracy, it was a system which was meant to be exploitative in nature. It was a system which was meant to benefit the white man. So essentially, we inherited that system and we just continued that. We did not make any major reforms, and due to which we have reached this weird state of weird state of existence where we're neither that modernized nor we're able to accept certain challenges in the 21st century with the same ferocity as it is required, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, such a simple thing, and maybe practitioners of policing and operations will defend the action that I am about to criticize here. But I think that the footage of the Director General of Police of JNK receiving the Union Home Minister at the airfield a few hours after the attack made me certainly think that the DGP should be somewhere else, maybe not at the airfield waiting for the UHM. He was just short of holding a bouquet of flowers. So you need to have maybe more spine in the services who maybe, and there are plenty of good officers also. It's just that the system of rewarding them has taken the back seat. So you need more people who are focused on operating. You need more people who prefer to be on the field rather than the conference hall. So that is my critique. Please feel free to disagree with me. I'm just giving you an opinion because
Absolutely.
this is a polarizing time and we are all allowed to have our opinions. Jay,
Absolutely,
back
and
to
we
you.
are also allowed to be emotional. Why should we always be so stoic and not express our discomfort, given the fact that in our neighboring countries, Hindus have been attacked and have been continuously been attacked, and now, of course, within India also it's been happening, and we cannot always say that it's like some RSS or a Hindutva conspiracy that Hindus are being attacked. So it is natural that there would be a time where people will feel a bit emotional and they would also try to say hello, you cannot keep getting away with it. And this is what brings us back to our next conversation as to what will be the Indian government's response.
Oh, it's perfect pivot. I was in fact just thinking about asking you the same thing. What should be our retaliation? And let's just put it like this, right? I think that the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty is a bold move. Let's not have any doubts about that. It has its limitations. We know that our capacity to divert and store water from the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, which are the rivers which are basically their water is diverted to Pakistan under the Indus Water Treaty. So we've definitely made a bold move. To sustain it will be slightly difficult because we, despite being upper riparian, don't have the capacity to significantly control the flow into Pakistan. Although my mom corrected me today, she believes that we can still do it slightly by the dams we have on Kishan Ganga and all. And I hope we do because I sincerely believe in punishing Pakistan. But we will have our limitations with the Indus Water Treaty. That is one thing we need to acknowledge because it is also not a bilateral treaty between India and Pakistan. It is an international treaty, the guarantor of which is
The World
World
Bank.
Bank. So we have our limitations on the international front also. Having said that, I think if we build enough infrastructure and do it quickly, which India doesn't have the culture of, but I hope we build it, then we will be able to significantly impact the flow of Indus Jhelum Chenab into Pakistan, which can damage their economy and it can give us a lot more control over their economy. कि ओ आज कश्मीर में फायरिंग हुई ये ले हमने पानी का फ्लो ही डाइवर्ट कर दिया. So that would be an ideal goal.
Yeah.
But so yeah, that's point number one. I do think that there should be a military retaliation to it. There are enough Lashkar camps, there are enough like training camps, there are enough like areas where handlers are placed. And that is going to be difficult to plan. It will be effective, and that is why the government will take its time. The government will strike, but it will strike at a point which is convenient for maybe the IB or the tri services and the RAW, which is when they put together the information. So their objective is convenience and strategic advantages. They are not planning to retaliate when Arnab Goswami says it's time to retaliate. They will retaliate when the chiefs and the DIBs and the RAW secretaries decide. So I think strategic delay is a good thing. The retaliation should be military. The retaliation should be effective, and the retaliation should be
Documented.
documented and also objective enough to know when we have to end it. We don't want to be pulled into a war of attrition.
Absolutely, I
It's
totally
going to
agree.
be loss of money, material, and most importantly, a war of attrition. We will lose men. We damn near came close to losing a very, very talented pilot in the Pulwama incident also, which was a very limited operation. So, now we need to see that when we do a military operation, it must have clear stated objectives and it must end soon with a very devastating strike at the Pakistani military terrorist apparatus there is. Then we should wrap it up and be like, okay, we've done our job. International community, come, Pakistan, you can cry a little bit. Then we can start, communicating. All
Of
that.
course, of course, of course. I mean, see, the West's perspective about Pakistan is never going to change because Pakistan is always going to be West's lapdog. So there is like no two ways about it. In fact, the West always uses Pakistan. Even China uses Pakistan to put more pressure on the Indian system. So I don't see the Americans or the British or anyone actually coming in India's defense at all. In fact, who knows? There could be some foul play from the people sitting in the deep state in the US as well. So
But Jay, this time for the first time, all of the P5 have condemned the attack on India, and as they call it, they have condemned an attack on Indian administered Kashmir for the first time.
Okay.
Because prior to this is
was
kind of a
occupation.
self goal also on Pakistan's part.
Exactly.
Because prior to this, they were attacking CRPF army units, where gaining support against them becomes difficult because then they always say that a military unit has been attacked, so it's harder to gain support. But when civilians are attacked, all of the P5, that is the permanent 5 members of the United States, United Nations Security
The
Council,
Anglo-Saxon world,
yeah,
just call it that.
yeah, they have come into India's support. Even China has condemned it. So there's definitely there is
I
a definite like advantage.
I definitely feel that
that we are standing on
I
now.
get it, but again, I'm so cynical with respect to the West that everything that they say I take it with a pinch of salt. So I would disagree with you a little bit. Even though with respect to diplomatic statements, yes, you can say it's a victory, but in the larger sense of things, they don't really want Pakistan to like not exist. They don't really want Pakistan not to like be an irritant in the region because it somehow suits them.
Yeah. In fact, JD Vance was in India when this happened. And the last time a major attack on Kashmiri civilians happened was maybe around, the major one was in 2000 when around 35 Sikhs were killed. And that was a day before Bill Clinton was visiting India. So also Khalistanis take note that this is the Pakistani state being very friendly. The 35 Sikhs were very unfortunately killed in Kashmir, and that was also around the time of Bill Clinton visiting. So there is always an intentional attempt to internationalize everything that happens in Kashmir, and honestly, I think it's become slightly lazy. One thing that I heard Praveen Swami also say from the print was, I made good note of it because there was a huge frustration on the part of the Pakistani diplomat lately, because at every international forum, at every UN meeting, at every international security conference or something, Pakistanis would go to the Indian diplomats and be like, we want to have a bilateral discussion about Kashmir. And India, who has by this point revoked Article 370, is working on building political consensus there, has had a fairly successful legislative assembly election there, was always sort of like, we don't want to talk about anything. Like, it's barely a
So
bilateral issue anymore.
I genuinely feel that from a domestic standpoint, I think we're very very strong. I feel we've got the. This is my opinion. You can disagree with it, but I think we've got a substantial chunk of the Kashmiri population backing us.
Yeah.
They have unanimously condemned this attack, which usually they never did. Like specifically, such massive condemnation rarely came. In fact, in some instances, specifically attacks against the security forces were celebrated.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the election that has happened.
Yeah.
You've got all the political leaders, including Mehbooba Mufti, come out on the streets and condemn these attacks. So I think from all the sides, I think we are in a very advantageous position. Now, I feel the only thing that's left is to send a message. Number one, that Hindus are here to stay, Asim Munir. Number two is that there has to be a very very strategic military response, so that they know that this is the last time they can pull off something like that, and this is the bitter end of the Pakistani nonsense that has been happening for the past 80 years. And I'm sorry, this is the response that you get.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that the Pakistani military joined with ISI thinks that it can attack and kill Hindus is not acceptable in the subcontinent, and we must have strong military retaliation against this Pak ISI Lashkar uh, tri junction there is to prove our point, and the military retaliation must be targeted. There are no doubts about it. Having said that, I also want to say that now is not the time to lose out on the gains we've made in Kashmir. Remember, the attack was desperate because the attack happened when India has been. Yeah, so we had a small technical disruption, but we faced an attack because Pakistan was desperate, because with the assembly election, with the revocation of Article 370, majority of it being bloodless, India has been winning. Let's not lose our gains by dividing ourselves further. We have to note that there have been a lot of bridges that have been built between New Delhi and Srinagar, and the Kashmiri youth is now more happy with integrating with India than they have ever been. You know, they are a thinking youthful population. They see what's happening with Pakistan. We have done a sincere attempt at bridge building with the Kashmiri population. So let's not lose our gains by limited xenophobia and limited racism just because a terrorist ideology across the border that disguises itself as the Pakistani army decided to strike us when we were winning, when it has the back against the wall. So, you know, we are still winning this fight. We must know that so much of the sacrifices have been made by JNK police, who have drained their khaki uniforms in red by sacrificing their own lives, fighting for our motherland, fighting for India, and none of us have the right to question that Kashmiri's patriotism who wears JKP on his shoulders. None of us do that. So let's stay united, and let's keep our gains moving forward stronger, and that is the only long term response. We will have a military response, and we must have a military response, but the larger response is that we must keep winning the perception fight we have been winning. Jed, that's my
Yes,
conclusion.
absolutely. The more we divide each other, the more we attack Muslims, the more we try to demonize and indulge in Islamophobia, we're essentially playing into the trap that the Pakistanis have set us up for. And generally, like nothing works better for them than indulging in these actions. So wait for the military response, number one. Respect your fellow citizens. Don't view them as Muslims or Kashmiris, view them as Indians. Number three, be be extremely optimistic that we are on the right path, we are winning, and hopefully this would be the final act of cowardice that the Pakistani state is going to indulge in against India specifically. Anyway, Jai Hind, and
Jai Hind, thank you for watching. Keeps tuning in. We will keep our internal security conversations ongoing. We will never forget the incidents that are happening in Jammu, that happened rather, now that happened in Pahalgam. We will never forget what's happened in Manipur. We will keep talking about left wing extremism, because the idea is to have more informed and more policy and strategic discussions around internal security than having really provocative ones. Provocation will help nobody, but policy insights will. Thank you. Jai
Thank you
Hind.
so much. Bye.